Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Dana and we had a fantastic conversation about the children's books she's written. And they're different. They're not like some of the people I've spoken to, and where they come from and how they came about. And we spoke a lot about her adopted daughter Maddie, and who, from everything she said, just the most remarkable person. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I really, really enjoyed it. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast, despite the fact that we've already been talking for about 20 minutes. So how are you anyway?
I'm very good, thank you. It's a lovely day here.
And just for reference for everybody, just let everybody know where you are.
I am in Kelowna, British Columbia in Canada, so I'm about 4 hours from Vancouver, British Columbia.
And have you always been in Canada?
Yes, I was born and raised here. Yeah.
And is that in the area where you are now?
No, I was actually born in Ontario on the other side of Canada, and we moved here when I was a baby. We moved out to Vancouver Island, so we lived out on Vancouver Island for a period, and then mostly I grew up in Alberta, in Calgary, and a few years up around Edmonton, then back to Calgary for university. But I've been here in Kelowna now since 1993.
Because one of the things we were talking about is how people don't always grasp how remote Canada can be.
It is very, very true. We were laughing because I was explaining that my children used to go visit their grandparents' cottage every summer, and the drive from our place to the family cottage was 21 and a half hours, and that just drops you off in the middle of Kelowna, or in the middle of Canada. There's still the whole other side of the country you can drive through.
Yeah, and as we were saying, because like you had that trip to Ireland, and like people were laughing because you were driving 4 hours for a day trip. And I was saying, 4 hours, I'd want to plan a night stop, because obviously in the UK, we just don't drive like that. And like saying in Canada, it's like 4 hours. So you've just found the neighbours. What's your problem?
Yeah,
You know?
that's right. That's right.
But we're supposed to be talking today about your book. And so could you, just give us some insight?
Sure. So I have two books out, and the most recent one is called Maddie Finds Her Place. And I wrote that book actually for my daughter Maddie, who I adopted when she was 21. She came into my life out of a youth homeless shelter when she was just about 17 years old. And she'd had quite a background. She'd been in and out of foster care, in and out of different family members' homes, and had ended up at a youth homeless shelter. So at the time, I was recently divorced. My adult children were off doing their thing. They were off at school and doing training and that kind of thing. And I had a big house with two dogs, and I thought, well, I could rent out a couple of rooms to students and save some money for renovations. And I've been a tutor for 30 years, so I've and a coach as well of various sports and that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I'll rent to a couple of students, and our local Boys and Girls Club reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to take Maddie in. And after some discussion, we decided to go ahead with it. And so when I later started writing children's books, the first book I wrote was called You Can Do Hard Things, and it was based on sort of all the lessons we gave our children as they were growing up, my biological children. And I wanted to write something for Maddie that sort of honored her, the resilience she showed in being the position she was in at 17 years old. She was still in school. She was working part-time. She was still trying desperately to make something of her life, in spite of the fact that, her biological family just hadn't had the capabilities and the ability to support her and care for her properly. So that's where this story comes from. But we wrote it as a children's story, and it's a rhyming book that is easy to read, but it's designed to be read with adults, because I think it can be used to have some conversations with your kids about, not everybody comes from the same background, and being compassionate to each other. So
it's difficult, isn't it, when I'm not sure when I don't know when we change as adults, but there's a point where, how can I word this? There's a point where you go, and I think this is difficult because children don't have any life experience as such. It's life experience comes the older you get, but then there's children that get thrown into life experience, which is, it's kind of grossly unfair in so many ways. And the difficulty, and I don't know all of the difficulties, and hopefully we can talk about some of that and how you overcome that and what kind of mindsets you need. But because when you get through your adult life, you tend to be able to deal with some adversity, at least because you've been around long enough to say, well, shit happens. Mm-hmm. And that it's but for the grace of God go I, and that kind of extends to people who end up with a severe illness, get a stroke, get divorced, whatever. It's like, I didn't plan this. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I think he said he's 71 and he's just bought a car, and he said, but because I'm 71, I'm thinking, yeah, will this car last me 10 years? Because maybe I'm only going to be around for no more than 10 years. And that's how his thinking has changed. Whereas you wouldn't have that thought at 20. Whereas he's now like, he doesn't want to overinvest in the car because he doesn't believe he's quite confident he won't be around when it's time to trade it in. And it was a bizarre conversation to be having with him.
It is, and that concept actually is literally what that first book is about. You Can Do Hard Things. It's a mom walking her children through life, and every time they come and they're complaining about something, and she says, well, that's okay. And they say, but oh, Mom, it's so hard. And I say, yeah, but you can do hard things.
Yeah.
Because, that was one of I think it's, as a parent, that's one of the most important lessons you can teach your children, is that you're capable of managing difficult things. And, in today's day and age, that doesn't always happen. A lot of time parents want to jump in and solve the problems for their kids and fix everything and we don't want to see our children struggle. But the reality of it is that those struggles as children, and making it through those struggles they have as children, that's what creates the resiliency in them in adults and gives them the ability to manage those difficult things.
I remember, crikey, my niece is 14 now, so I don't know how long ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, because I thought she was quite young, but she was sort of talking about life not being that fair because her older brother is autistic and is always going to need some sort of support. And, so she never had an older brother, and she was always there's an expectation that you have to help out and looking after him. And, and it's very difficult for the younger sister to be giving instructions to her older brother and then nagging him and moaning him. And she's quite rightly said, like, it's not fair. And it's like, no, I said, like, you're right, it's not fair. It really isn't. It's not fair. But it is your reality, and he is your brother. And that's never going to change. You are always going to have to be looking out for him. You're always going to have to be looking after him. Nobody is going to be reciprocating that for you. And I said, and that's the truth. I said, but you are right, it's not fair. But it's never going to change. And whilst at least you're living at home with my sister, every time you guys plan a day out, plan a trip, it has to be around Mason first. There are no other options because of his autism. And I said, there is never going to be a day when that's fair, but it's never going to change either. And it's a harsh thing, a harsh reality to. But anybody who has anyone that's disabled in their family in any capacity will understand what that's like. Well, the younger siblings will understand what that's like, because anything you do, okay, what about so what about? And it's like, yeah, but it's my birthday. Yeah, but if they can't cope, if they can't do this, we can't do your birthday. You know what I mean? And it's a real harsh reality for them, and it's, you can't say to them, you have to kind of acknowledge, you're right, it's not fair, but it's never going to change either. And this is that thing I was saying, is as we get older as adults, we kind of realise there are just things in life that aren't fair, and we become really accepting of it. But when you're young, it's a really difficult concept to have to live with.
Yeah, it is. And it's It's so true. My grandson is autistic, and
Mm.
my husband is actually on the autism spectrum, high functioning, but also on the spectrum. And that actually is one of their most difficult. Both of them are very high functioning, but that is actually one of their most difficult things. Is that for them, everything is black and
Mm.
white. Sorry, and right or wrong
Yeah.
and very clear cut, and there's no gray zone in between. And the reality of it is most of the world lives in that gray zone in between, and if something is not fair, I can get the same response from my husband who is 60 as I get from my grandson who is 8.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's not right. I
Yeah.
understand it's not fair, however,
Yeah.
it is the way it is, and we need to work with that. So it is an interesting concept. And Maddie, life for Maddie was not fair.
Yeah.
She was passed from family member to family member. There were lots of, in the children's book, we just refer to it as Maddie's family had grown-up problems and leave
Yeah.
it at that. It's not an issue to discuss in a children's book, but her family had a lot of struggles, and she unfortunately suffered for that. She was the eldest of the group of siblings that were being raised together, and often was sort of in a position where she felt like she had to care for them and stand up for them and protect them. And yeah, it was difficult for her. And then, like I said, ending up in the youth homeless shelter and not having one of the things that in the book, it was really important for me to include. And my illustrator, Nicholas, did an amazing job of the illustrations for it. But in the book, on every page, Maddie has her backpack with her, because when she and I eventually sort of started discussing all of her background and everything else, she said she often just had what was in her bag, and that was it. That's what she moved from one place to the next with, was that backpack. So in the picture book, every page, Maddie has her backpack with her, because that's how she learned to live her life. Was everything important was in her bag in case somebody came and picked her up and took her somewhere else. And so that was, again, it's a children's book, but there's pieces in that book that honor the very difficult story Maddie really lived.
That's a hard thing. Everything you have and possess is in a backpack, and it has to be that way because I'm not going to be staying anywhere. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
that survival tool to like
Mm-hmm.
to be that young and to figure out, okay, I can't have possessions because if they don't fit in my backpack. And do you know what I mean? I'm trying to wrap my head around the depth of that and what that must be like. Because
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Maddie must have been. Did you say you took her on at 17?
She was just about 17 when she
Yeah.
moved in here. And
So how old was she when she
she
figured out that she needed a backpack? That a backpack was all she could have.
she says that's all, she remembers always having her backpack. So she doesn't know when she started doing that, but in her memory, she's always had a backpack that she kept her most important things in,
And
and she carried it with her.
I'm trying. I don't know why, but that really hits hard. And there's this really dark
Mm-hmm.
place I'm going to because I'm trying to think of how young she must have been and how many times it must have happened that she thought she was
Mm-hmm.
somewhere and was going to stay somewhere, accumulated maybe just 3 pairs of socks, 3 pairs of pants, 5 t-shirts, do you know what I mean, a coat, do you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and then got
Yeah.
hoisted out of there. And because she couldn't
Mm-hmm.
carry it in a backpack, couldn't take it with her. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, that's a really dark place to be in. And I'm trying to
Yeah,
I'm
and
trying to wrap
it,
my head around, and I don't know why I find that so emotional. I really don't, but it's just, because I'm very detached from this, you know what I mean? But I'm just
mm-hmm.
thinking of this little kid, and
Yeah.
all you remember is, your memory is, if I can't have it in a backpack, I can't keep it.
Yeah. And it was, she it was very interesting talking to her, because along with that idea that she had to keep all of her possessions that were important to her in her backpack, she also she came when she was, at 17, when we finally started talking about sort of her background and stuff. And she would say things to me like, well, you don't understand because I've been a terrible person.
Yeah.
And we'd go back and forth with that. And finally we sat down one day and I said, look, I want you to tell me all the terrible things you've done, all of them. Let's just start talking about it. Tell me all the, and she started listing these things that she felt made her a terrible person. And she kind of had gone on for about 15 or 20 minutes. And I said, okay, stop. Because at the time she would have been 17. So my biological daughter would have been 18, and my son at the time would have been 21. And they were both out of the home, sort of at college or university or training, working, doing that kind of thing. My son was actually an electrician by then. So there's not a large age spread between them. And I said, okay, stop. I said, we've been talking now for 25 minutes, and you haven't yet listed a single thing that one or both of my children haven't done.
Yeah.
But my children haven't been beaten. They haven't been kicked out of the home. They haven't been verbally or emotionally abused because of it. You are talking about things that every teenager does in one fashion or another. Being a teenager is about pushing against walls and finding your own space and breaking away from the adults around you because you need to be independent. And I said, like, you haven't listed anything yet. Not a single thing that they haven't, but one or both of them haven't done. And so then she started getting a little bit more and a little bit more. And finally she told me a couple of stories, and I looked at her and I said, by that point, we'd been talking for about an hour and a half or so. And I said, anything that you do to survive when you are that age is not terrible.
No, it's not.
Because the options you had were not good. None of the options you had were good choices. So if you had to do something to survive, that's not a terrible thing. It just isn't. It doesn't make you a terrible person. That's, you have to get over that. I said, and in that first conversation, I said, has anybody ever told you this wasn't your fault? And she said, no. And I said, well, they should have. It should have been the first thing every social worker you ever had told you.
Yeah.
This was not, because they said it wasn't the 2-year-old in the room that was the problem. It wasn't the 5-year-old. It wasn't the 8-year-old. It wasn't the 12-year-old. It's not even the 15-year-old. It was the adults in the room that didn't have the capabilities to deal with life in a functional way. They didn't have the abilities they needed to give you the care and support you needed. And none of that was your fault. And I think that was the first time she'd ever heard that. Well, I know it was. She said, no, nobody's ever told that to me. And I thought that is devastatingly awful, that nobody at 17, that's the first time somebody's telling you it wasn't your fault they moved you around when you were 2.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
Because
it is.
You mentioned something earlier, and I loved the way you phrased it, because you said adult problems. And
yeah.
And the reason I like that so much is because it's very difficult to explain to a child that adults have their own problems, and the thing that adults are not always capable of doing is accepting responsibility, and that even though most adults on the planet will agree that there's a certain way you should live, many adults struggle to do that.
Yeah.
And they're just in so many ways not capable of doing it.
And that's a conversation we've had with Maddie many times as well, is, you have to understand that your biological family, they're the way they are because of the life they lived and the experiences they had. And there are reasons they weren't capable of providing you the care you needed. We don't have to judge them because of that, but we can acknowledge that it wasn't your fault. And let's move on from there.
Yeah, I remember some years ago, because I haven't always had the greatest relationship with my own father. Not for any particular reason, we're just we're just not that close. But I remember having a really rough time, and I don't know why, but I had this sudden epiphany that, well, you're single, you don't have any kids, and your dad was married with 3 kids, and you're twice the age he was when he had kids, and you're still struggling now, so maybe you should cut him some slack, because he was probably doing the best he could with the resources he had. And it was a weird kind of epiphany to have in my 40s, that actually, it wasn't, it wasn't particularly perfect, but maybe he was doing the best he could with what he had at hand to, financially and just as a person. It was purely based on, you're probably twice his age now, from those memories you've got, and you haven't got your life together either. So
and that's the reality, right? It's we all, one of the things I used to say to my biological children as I was raising them was, don't kid yourself. Nobody gets through life scot-free.
No.
If you stop and you talk to somebody long enough, every person has been through difficult times and hard things. The world is not out to get you. But that goes with us too. Us as adults, we also deal with difficult things, and our parents had their own things that they had to deal with. My mom comes from a family of 12 children. There were things growing up that were difficult for them to deal with that many children. And I didn't know my grandfather. He had passed away by the time I was born, but I can't imagine how difficult it would have been for him and for my grandmother as well, to parent 12 children and provide all of them with what you needed. And there will have been gaps. There's just no way around that, right? So that idea that adults are people too, grown-ups too, parents are people too, grandparents are people too, and they've all had issues they needed to deal with. And so we can acknowledge that they didn't provide Maddie what she needed, but we can also acknowledge that they're human beings with their own experiences and their own stories, and not judge them based on that. We can just say to Maddie, look, I'm here now, and I'm going to give you what you need, and we're going to move forward. And that's really, the storybook, writing the book was about honoring Maddie and how resilient she had to be to get to that point. And the other thing that's on every page in the book, again, in the illustrations, it's not a stated concept, but in the illustrations, I'm in the background with the 2 dogs in every image. And the message we wanted was, there are people out there. But you have to be strong enough in and of yourself to get to the point where you meet them. Because that was always what really struck me about Maddie, is she had gotten herself to 17 years old to be in a position where, when we met, I said, yeah, okay, come on in. Let's help you out here. And again, by 21, I was remarried, and we'd actually adopted Maddie.
How old's Maddie now?
So Maddie now is 25.
Cool. And life going good for her? She's doing all right?
She's doing okay. She's got some health issues we're working through right now, but she's, she finished high school. She got some post-secondary training. She's worked as an optometrist assistant, we call them here. And so she's doing well. She's doing well, working through things. No,
it's important though, isn't it? Because like we were saying, it's always difficult. Again, going back to something I said earlier about when you get a certain amount of life experience, and you kind of like, well, look, shit happens. This is life. There's an element of that again, which is really hard to understand. That but we can only deal with today's stuff. It's and again, trying to explain to somebody who's really young, who has no memory of any security except for a backpack, effectively. That's probably the only certainty and security she had until she met you. Is how do you get them to understand that, do you know what? Everything was terrible. Absolutely. But it's not today.
Yeah. It was, one of the most difficult things actually to get her to understand was that we're not going to toss you out.
Yeah.
We're not going to throw you away. To get her to believe in that security was probably the first step we had to do. And it took a long time. It was, honestly, this is kind of a funny story. I don't think she really believed it until she had finished a college program, and she had asked us if she could have a party with her class. And I said, sure. So she hosted a party that she would have been 21, I think, 20. She would have been 20, I think, when she finished the program. And my husband and I and my father and some friends had gone out to karaoke at a pub and, spent the night there. We got home about 12:30 in the morning, and we live on a very short street. There's about 5 or 6 houses on it. And we came around the corner, and there were 5 police cars with lights on in the street. And we thought, oh my, okay. So we parked down at the end of the street. And now my husband was in the armed forces. He was a range instructor and trained in as a sniper. And when he left the armed forces, he did personal protection and bodyguarding and bank guarding and security and everything. He is a very, very large man. I am 5 foot, maybe 1 if I'm lucky on a good day. So I am not. My dad's a pretty big guy too. So there we were walking up the street towards my house, and we've got policemen coming up. Oh, and I said, it's my house. Like, oh, come on in. So we start walking up the road, and they explained, we had a call from the neighbors and there's been some issues. And I'm like, okay, let me just go in and let's see what's going on. So we went in, we got everybody out of the house, out onto the front lawn. And I was just talking to everybody. And as I said, I have a lot of experience with teenagers. I tutored for 30 years. I coached sports. I raised my own children and everything else. Everybody out, and they're all like, what do you mean? Everybody out on the front lawn. And we started going through, where are you staying today? Well, I'm supposed to be staying here. Get inside and start cleaning up. Where are you staying today? My brother's supposed to pick me up. Go call him and sit down over there and wait for him. And just started going through the line. And the police, the head constable looked at me and said, I don't think you really need us here right now. I'm like, no, I'm good now. And she's like, okay, well, we're just going to step back. We'll let you manage things. So as I was going through and I was sorting out children, and all of these kids, let me point out, these were college students. So they were all legal to be drinking. There was alcohol involved, but they were all legal to be drinking. And one of the constables walks up with 2 young gentlemen, and they're like, they would like to leave. They have an Uber coming, but their backpack and wallet is in the house. So I take them downstairs, get their bags, and bring them out again. And okay, so off he went, and they kind of creeped away. So anyway, we got it all sorted out. We got everybody, the police finally left and everything else. And I realized I couldn't find Maddie. And my dad was gone. And my dad, we found them on the back patio, and she was just sobbing, absolutely sobbing. And he was just holding her while she cried. And I said, what's going on? And he looked at me, she thinks you're going to kick her out. And we brought her in, and I gave her a hug, and I said, okay, let's sit down. Tell me what happened. And she explained how it had all started. And unfortunately, one of the kids in her class brought an older brother and his girlfriend. There was alcohol involved. The girlfriend wanted to leave. The brother didn't. And he hauled off and punched her in front of everybody. And so the girls took her downstairs. The boys pushed him out of the house, and chaos erupted as he was trying to get in the house because he wanted her to come. And so there was fighting involved. There was, fisticuffs and everything else. And so she's sobbing and she's telling me this. And I said, why are you crying? And she said, you're going to kick me out. I just know it. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. And I said, stop. I said, the only thing you did wrong here was you should have called the cops the minute he hit his girlfriend. Period.
Yeah.
Everything that had, like, what happened after was you guys trying your best to manage a situation that you're not equipped to manage. A guy who, I mean, they're not boys, they were young adults, but a guy who will haul off and hit his girlfriend in front of an entire group of people is not somebody you should be dealing with. Yeah. So that's the only thing you did wrong here, is you should have called the cops yourself. And I think that was when she realized that was it. That's all we said to her. Was, look. And the other thing we said is, I said, make sure everybody at this party understands that if somebody else hits a girl in my house, they better hope the police get there before my husband, because I'm going to let him play, because that is not okay. And they were like, oh, okay, all right. So that's it. There's your lesson. But that, honestly, and I mean, it's a funny story now, but it broke my heart to realize that she thought I was going to kick her out because of that.
Yeah, It must be horrible because it's like you say, it's you're looking at that and you're just like, it's a good day, to be honest. No one's really hurt. Obviously
Yeah,
the girl was hurt, but there's
yeah.
been worse parties with worse outcomes. The house hasn't been
Hmm.
really trashed. Some people are still staying and they're cleaning up, so we'll all have breakfast in the morning.
Yeah,
You've probably had a really horrible night, and she's worried because she's going to lose her home. And you just like,
yeah.
no, no, no. This again,
No,
these things happen. This just
yeah.
happens. It's not
This
no,
wasn't
no
your
one's
fault.
fault.
I'm
Yeah,
not. No,
and to
it is what it is, and so that was. But I think that was when she first started to realize that we meant it, because we'd been saying it all along, right?
yeah, but
But
it's
I think that was the first time she realized
but
that no, we meant it.
yeah,
It's
because you
and you're going to make mistakes. It's
and all
okay.
and yeah, and I'd imagine she'd been told 100 things growing up that, and it's cliche, but actions are louder than words, aren't they? And everyone's probably
Hmm.
made promises. And d- d- does does she realise today how remarkable she is?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet.
Yes.
We're working on it. We're
Yeah.
working on
Yeah.
it, but we see glimpses of it. But there's still a lot there that she's got to work through. And that's, I look at her and one of the things I always say is, in some ways she's 40,
Yeah.
in some ways she's 25, and in some ways she's still 10. And in any given situation, we have to figure out which one we're dealing with,
Yeah.
and act appropriately based on that. Because boy, there's some knowledge she has of this world that I wish she never had to have. And then there's some other things that she's just never experienced, and you have to help her through that, whereas so it's very, very different
Yeah.
parenting, and but she's working on it, and that's why I said to her, your job is just keep working at it. Every
Yeah.
step forward is good, and we applaud it and celebrate it.
Just going back a little bit. What made you like? Where did the concept and the idea of the first book come from?
So, well, it's kind of funny. Like I said, I've tutored for 30 years. I've tutored everything from preschool to first and second year university in pretty much everything except second languages. I don't like dealing with languages, but math, physics, English, social studies, all of those kinds of things. And so I have a lot of experience with teenagers, especially, and kids in general. I also substitute taught in the preschool and the private school my kids went to, and I coached sports and participated and everything else. And so everybody kept saying, "Oh, you should write a parenting book." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, maybe one day." But I own my own business. I work full time. I don't have time to write a book.
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah.
other things on the go, right? I mean, it's like everybody thought, well, it's easy. It's just write the parenting book, write about all the things. And I'm like, no, I don't. Trust me, I understand that writing a book is not easy, and I don't have time to do it. But it occurred to me one day that you can provide a lot of the same information in children's books in short stints.
Mm.
And so, you can pick one lesson you want both children and parents to learn and put it in a children's book where they're going to read it together and both get the message and maybe start some conversations. And so that kind of was the thought process behind the first book. And so when I sat down and thought about it, I thought, I think the absolute most important message I learned from my parents was that I was capable.
Yeah.
And how do you tell a child that, right? Like, how do you take that concept of you are capable of functioning, fully functioning, you can handle anything, you can do anything, and how do you put it in a children's book? And I realized, well, you just tell them you can do hard things. And so in that first book, that's the concept. That's the title of the book. You can do hard things. Starts when the children in the story are very young and Mummy, can I climb the monkey bars? Yep, go ahead. Help me, Mummy. No, but it's hard. Yeah, but you can do hard things. Okay. And there's something under my bed. It's okay. Well, let's look together. No, that's hard. Yeah, it's okay. You can do hard things. Let's look, right? And it builds throughout it. It's studying for exams. Oh my gosh, I'm going to fail. I'm like, okay, well, what happens if you do? Does the world end? Right? Is the world as we know it, is it going to explode? I mean, and we actually got some negative feedback on the sarcasm as they become teenagers, because there is a little bit of sarcasm in the book as well. And I thought to myself, well, I don't know about you, but sarcasm is what just saved my children's lives on many
Yeah,
occasions when they were teenagers. Whether it was me going their direction or they're going mine, it was a very useful tool to have. And so that was kind of the concept behind the first book. And there's a scene in it, and it's the scene that we've had the most negative feedback about, actually. And it's just the girl is a teenager, and she's talking to her mom about the boyfriend who's walking away, and he's angry, clearly. And she says, he's mean to me sometimes, Mom. And she said, well, how does that make you feel? Like I maybe like I want to break up, but it's just so hard because everybody thinks he's so great and he's different when everybody else is around. And so and the mom says, well, but you can do hard things,
yeah,
right? And so we got a lot of negative feedback about that. And so I actually tried to discuss it in interviews a lot, because I explained to people, as an adult, we have a very visceral response to that particular scene because of the red flags we see in it. It's
yeah,
about controlling and potentially violence and that kind of thing. But a 4-year-old reading that book, the conversation can be had. Are we being a good friend if we're friendly, if we're being nice in front of everybody else, but not being nice in private? Is that being a good friend? And what about the opposite way? If we're being mean in private, but or being
yeah.
nice in private, but mean in front of everybody else? That's talking about friendship with a 5-year-old, right? But it's the same concept. It just grows
It
with them. So
it because one of the things I think people, sorry, because I think I cut you off and I didn't mean to. I apologise.
yeah, no, it's okay.
Is one of the things I think adults don't appreciate is the hypocrisy they demonstrate to children, because they will behave one way in front of somebody, and then the child will hear them talking about that person in a different way when they're not there. And I can't remember who taught me this, but I remember somebody always saying to me, "Don't make children share their toys if they don't want to." And I was just like, He said, "Do you share things with people when you don't want to?" I said, "No, absolutely not. Don't tell your children to then either." They said, you learn to share with people you trust, people you want to share with. They said, you don't let anybody have your possessions without your permission. You don't let anybody. They said, so why would you force your children to do that and then behave differently yourself? He said, children don't understand that. Children tend to want to hoard their toys because they're not sure about things yet and they're trying to figure it out. Let them figure it out. Don't make them share. But at the same time, correct your child if your child says, well, they won't let me share. It's like, well, you didn't either. You have to learn to reciprocate and give and take. And it was
one of the
go on.
yeah go ahead. So I was just going to say, one of the most amazing parenting lessons my mom ever taught me was, she was visiting us and my son would have been 4, I think, at the time, and I knew he had done something, and I said to him, did you do this? And he said, no. And I said, look, like, you need to be honest with it. And when it was all said and done, I mean, he and I resolved it and off he went and everything else. And my mom looked at me and said, why did you do that? And I said, why did I do what? And she said, you already knew the answer to that question. Why did you put him in a position where he could lie? Because he was afraid. You're his mom. He doesn't want to disappoint you. He doesn't want to, if you know the answer already, just deal with that.
Yeah. Yes, that's really, I've never thought about that, but that's really sound advice, isn't it?
Yeah, like my mom was amazing. My mom is amazing. She was a very good parent. But I remember looking at her, and I would have been, I don't know if my son would have been, like I said, about 4, so I was probably about 27, I think. And I remember, I hadn't really thought of it that way.
I know that's a really good point. Yeah, if you already know they've done it, why put them in the position to lie?
Yeah, like, because they're afraid of you. They don't want to get in trouble. They're going to lie, and then they're going to get in trouble for that. She said, like, he did it. Just deal with that. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, note to self. I'll keep that in mind. But it's like you say, we have these it's like we have these different responses based on whether we're trying to teach them or we're actually living this, and we shouldn't. And
Yeah.
that's like you said, that's part of my response to that scene is, look, if you're having a very visceral response to the scene, it's because you know what the red flags are. You've experienced those things as an adult or whatever, but a 4-year-old doesn't have that response. It's just an opportunity to talk about friendships and what good friendships are and what bad friendships are. And sometimes that's about the person over here and what they're doing to be a good friend. But sometimes it's about me and am I being a good
Yeah.
friend? And it's the same conversation. And so, and that was the concept behind that first book, right? Was let's talk about these things. These are hard things, but we're capable. We all have to deal with hard things in life,
Yeah.
and let's move forward. So that was the concept behind the first one.
Yeah, because I think it's frustrating for children and confusing because we teach them. I had this conversation with my sister once because, and it's really grand of me to talk to my sister about raising 2 kids on her own when I don't have any of mine. But I fill the role very well. But she was talking to the kids about being nice, and I said, "Whoa, stop! You've already got nice kids. You need to teach them to say no to people who aren't nice."
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard for parents. I do understand it because parents have a difficult role. But nice children don't need to be told how to be nice. They need to be told how to put up boundaries. And when those horrible kids come along, to say, no, I don't want to do that. But if you always tell them you've got to be nice, it's just like, no, they don't. They don't have to. Because I think parents, when they see their children, don't understand that your children are actually all right. They're okay. They're learning to navigate life. But most kids are nice and left to their own devices are really kind to each other. What you have to protect them from is the horrible little, bastards, and you need to teach them how to say no to those people and say, actually, I don't want, like you're saying, in that story that you can do hard things because this person isn't being nice to you and they're not being nice to you, but everyone thinks they're like this, but when other people aren't around and they're not listening, they behave differently. Okay, well, you can do hard things. You can you can say no to that person and it's okay.
Yeah. And it's just this concept that that parents, like you say, you want. It's almost like we as adults feel like our children are a reflection of us rather than recognizing that they're not. My children's choice, like my kids now, my biological children now are 29 and 26. My stepson is 29. My adopted daughter, Maddie, is 25. And what I recognize is the choices they make in life are a reflection of them.
Yeah.
It's the lives they're living, the choices they make, and everything else. And so I can't take personally the choices they make. It's not about me anymore. And I recognize that. It's easy to recognize when they're adults, but you also have to recognize that when they're children. Like children that go to school and spend 8 hours a day in school, that's 8 hours a day that you have no idea what they're doing. You don't know what the adults around them are, how they're being treated. You don't know how the children are. You don't know how they're behaving either. I mean, let's face it, they could also be the problem sometimes, right? So you can't, when you try to parent them like you know everything about their lives, that's a problem because you don't and you can't.
Yeah. It's you can't. It's really difficult. It is really difficult. It is really difficult. And just I'm conscious of time. Where can people find your book or books?
So now in the UK, I'm not sure. In Canada, we've got them at Indigo Books, Barnes and Noble on their online. They can be purchased on Amazon as well. And then they can also go to my website, which is danasuttonbooks.com. So they can be purchased from there as well. We also have some other things on the website, children's activity pages. And one of the articles that I wrote that is called Lessons for My Children. And it's just a commentary on the things that I'd really like them to remember when I'm gone. And they all read them and laughed because one of them was, I don't tell the funny stories about your life to embarrass you. It's because it brings back the joy and the memories.
Yeah.
And I love them, right? It gives me joy to tell people about, my daughter being faster than a stink bug or my son going to be faster than somebody else one day or whatever.
I had this,
So,
as you said, that I have two memories with my niece, and one is I like reminding her that she's my favourite niece, and it took her quite a few years for her to go, "I'm your only niece." I said, "Yeah, but you're still my favourite." And the other thing
yeah,
she wasn't sure. I think she's still trying to figure this out because she's a teenager now. She's 14, and I said, and I've started. I don't know how we got into the conversation. I was just like, "You've no idea what it was like when you were like from about 3 years old until you were about 8." I said, "You were like the most amazing gift this family could have ever asked for." I said, "You were stunning. I loved you so much." I said, you were just like the greatest thing I had in my life." I said, "You're doing all right still." I said, "But you'll never relive those glory years. You never will understand how cute and amazing you were."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's kind of like, "Hang on a second. Is he being nice to me or is he being mean to me?"
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that was one of the things on the article. It was, yeah. The other thing that was, I said, you have to evaluate, every situation is unique.
Yeah.
You need to evaluate it based on the best information you have at that time. Take the time to gather information, make a decision, and then move forward. There's no right or wrong answer. There's the choice you made and the choice you didn't, and there will be positive and negatives in both. So make a decision, move forward, and don't worry about whether it was the right or wrong decision. Just keep moving forward.
And lastly, just because I like to ask a random question, I want you to imagine that you have a time machine. The time machine preferably is a car of some description. What type of car would it be? Where would you go? And what would be on the radio?
Oh, see, it would be a motorcycle
Perfect.
because I ride a motorcycle. It'd be an Indian Scout. The music on the radio would likely be Tim McGraw, country music. Love him. And where would I go? Honestly, I think I'd go back to get Maddie.
Perfect. And that's a wonderful place to stop. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
And there you go. That was Dana and talking about her books. And I will put the link in the description of how to find Dana and find her books. And what a remarkable story. And I went to an emotional place during the podcast. I just imagining a young Maddie and everything in her bag, in her backpack. And I can't imagine it. And yeah, I don't know what to say except, crikey, we need to appreciate sometimes just how well we're doing in life. And on that note, as I always do say, I am grateful to everybody that watches, supports, and shares and comments. It's appreciated. All the support for the podcast is appreciated. And wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.